There's a compounding interest on each of these vehicles that are just sitting on their dealership lot month to month. Individually, not so bad. But when you have hundreds of unsold inventory sitting month to month, sometimes over a year, that becomes a huge pain point for the dealership. Quickly reminded of why I do not like these things. $71,360 for this hunk of plastic here. Whenever you finance through a dealership and you work through their preferred lender, they get a small kickback from that lender. So fascinating that we went from, they couldn't sell them for anything less than a $5,000 markup to 10 grand off and they still can't move the metal. Kind of wild, huh? Any general manager of any dealership knows that selling a vehicle, even at a little bit of a loss, even a little bit lower than invoice, is still a much wiser move, a much wiser chess piece move than keeping it for several more months on their lot. Quite astonishing to see the profit margin that's being built into these vehicles today. The biggest weapon that you have in your arsenal when trying to negotiate a vehicle is your ability to walk away, pick up the phone and call another dealership up the road. There's so many dealerships that are offering huge discounts, so many dealerships that are actually willing to play ball. It's not worth your time and effort to try to squeeze every nickel out of your stingy local dealership. It's like when that girl, Candace, broke up with you in 3rd grade. What did your mom say? There's plenty of other fish in the sea. It's true. Candace. YouTube Untamed here. How much should you expect to get off of your next vehicle purchase? In today's video, I'm going to provide you with a number of steps to follow and some tips, tricks, and advice that I have learned over the years while owning a nationwide auto brokerage service, as well as navigating a number of my own personal purchases, often for desirably trimmed vehicles. So stick with me as we talk through it all. You guys recall throughout the pandemic and really throughout the last few years, buying a vehicle like this Toyota RAV4 was actually pretty difficult. A lot of dealers were actually trying to deploy greedy markups and get over sticker price for them over MSRP. We're talking 5, 10, sometimes even more than that, $1,000 over that price tag, right? Just because they are a desirable vehicle, great fuel economy, offers tremendous peace of mind. It being a Toyota, this here was a hot commodity. And a lot of people, obviously, when they went into a dealership, they didn't really know where to start when it comes to negotiating a deal on it. And well, a lot of dealerships were successful at deploying those tactics, saying, well, we only have 2 of these allocated to the dealership. Oftentimes they're pre-sold, so you better buy it now, otherwise the next guy in line is going to get it. And I hated that so many dealers treated you like a number. They treated you like another brick in the wall, and that was pretty disgusting to see. Greed definitely took over so many dealerships, and that's a shame, right? But right now, there's a lot more inventory, right? There's no chip shortage, there's no supply crisis, so you're able to negotiate deals. So let's check this one out here. This one's an XLE Premium, and the price tag, hopefully you can see, is $38,324. So what is the starting point? Where should you begin the negotiation process? Should you just come in here with your checkbook out and say, hey, I'll take this RAV4, let's write it out? No, you need to start at invoice. Find out what invoice pricing is on this RAV4 and make that your starting point. The part that trips so many people up is invoice pricing on that Toyota RAV4 and invoice pricing on these smaller Toyota cars behind me, the Corollas, the Camrys, is very different comparatively to vehicles like this here. This is a Toyota Sequoia, brand new Toyota Sequoia, a high-spec, high-trimmed example. The invoice gap between MSRP and that invoice price tag is much different. We're talking several $1,000s difference. So it's important to understand where that invoice is and what it means. So let's talk through that. Technically speaking, invoice is the price tag in which the dealership pays for the vehicle. And I say technically on purpose. There are some additional fees built into invoice pricing too, to where the dealership could profit even if they sold it at that price. So this one here is sporting the iForce Max. This is a Toyota Sequoia Platinum Hybrid. Look at that freaking price tag, $85,000, over double the price tag of those RAV4s over there. It's a pretty sad reality that we're finding ourselves in. So many of these vehicles are in the $80,000 price point range now. Even a lot of these Ford F-150s over here, $65,000 plus. For being real with each other, invoice pricing on the Sequoia Platinum is probably low 70s. Low 70s, maybe teetering up to the mid 70s, but I would say maybe 72, 73 grand is invoice pricing on this. So by them selling it at that $85,000 price tag, they're easily profiting, quote unquote profiting, $11,000 to $13,000 on it, right? And that same goes for a lot of these F-150s back here. Although priced at $65,000, $70,000, invoice pricing on many of these, that gap is even larger. We're talking maybe low 50s. So that is why you see a lot of dealers, a lot of Ford dealers in particular, offering these substantial discounts of $12,000, $14,000 off to move this metal. Because it actually behooves a dealership to move this metal more and sell it perhaps even at a little bit of a loss if it means getting rid of that flooring cost and getting reallocation set. One might ask, how can a dealership sell it at invoice and still make a profit on the vehicle? Well, one clear example is selling it at invoice, but you finance through the dealership. Whenever you finance through a dealership and you work through their preferred lender, they get a small kickback from that lender. That lending institution, that bank, will give a kickback to the dealership by going through them for that loan. I'm talking something small, anywhere from $500 up to $1,500, depending on the amount of the vehicle purchase and the duration of the loan. So even though they're selling at invoice, they might just still be making $1,500 on the deal. I always think it's important to plug flooring cost. Every single vehicle that a dealership has on their lot is on a line of credit. So every single month that passes by, they're paying a very small amount, but kind of like a credit card, right? There's a compounding interest on each of these vehicles that are just sitting on their dealership lot month to month. Individually, not so bad. But when you have hundreds of unsold inventory sitting month to month, sometimes over a year, that becomes a huge pain point for the dealership because they're losing money. They're bleeding out every single month. A lot of you might come up on mic and say, well, when I ask for invoice pricing, they don't provide it to me. Really, in my experience, I have never met a single dealership that has not provided me the invoice price on a vehicle that I was inquiring about. It really is just a matter of how you ask for it. If you're polite and respectful in the way of which you ask, like I said, they're going to provide it to you. What I say is, hey, well, understanding you guys need to make money too, can you provide me with that invoice pricing for this particular Tundra here? And they will. They want to show it to you, and they want to show you where their starting point is, and really, hopefully, their goal is to try to meet in the middle somewhere between MSRP and that price, that invoice pricing. That's their goal. Your goal, of course, is to get as close as possible to that invoice pricing. And if the vehicle has been sitting on the dealership lot for months on end, that's your leverage. Although they won't tell you, any sales manager and any general manager of any dealership knows that selling a vehicle, even at a little bit of a loss, even a little bit lower than invoice, is still a much wiser move, a much wiser chess piece move than keeping it for several more months on their lot. That flooring cost is, of course, a big part of that equation, but the reallocation rates that dealership then gets by moving metal and selling units, that's huge, right? But every unit sitting here, it's taking up some of their allocations. But if they're pumping them out and cycling them through very quickly, I mean, that's every dealership's dream. They want to move them out. They want that quantity, right? They want to move that metal fast. Even if it is for a smaller profit margin, that's better for the dealership. Now, you guys know how I feel about the new Toyota Tundras, the Tacomas, the Land Cruisers, the 4Runners, you name it. But I try to find maybe one or two that I kind of like. I kind of like the look of this. I like the Lunar Rock to it, the 1794 edition. But then again, I'm quickly reminded of why I do not like these things. $71,360 for this hunk of plastic here. It just drives me insane. Insane. This one doesn't even support the hybridized iForce Max version, if you can believe it. Just a twin turbo V6. They still want that type of price tag. Absolutely disgusting, if you ask me. And here's a quick example of a little bit more of a middle of the road Toyota Tundra. This one's a limited Crew Max. Again, not sporting the iForce Max, but there you go. $65,000 right here. This same exact truck back in 2021 with the previous generation would easily cost you maybe mid-40s, upper 40s at the most if you spec'd it out fully. But look at that. Nearly $15,000, $20,000 gap between them. I won't make this video a smear campaign on the Tundra, I promise. I won't fall victim to that. But another thing I would encourage you to do, and I alluded to it a little bit earlier, is once you find a vehicle on a dealership lot that you've been eyeballing for a while and you're interested in, do some homework on it. Obviously, do some nationwide Google searches on that same exact vehicle. Pretend it's a Toyota Tacoma, TRD Sport or TRD Off-Road. Look nationwide. Pull up Auto Trader, Cars.com, Car Guru, whatever it is you normally use. Look nationwide and see what kind of price tags they're being advertised with, what kind of discounts they're being advertised with, and then use that to your leverage as your beginning starting point. Say, hey, let's find out how close to invoice we can get, and then let them know, hey, I found one in Texas, priced at $10,000 off. Can we negotiate a deal for that? Equally important to that is to look at their dealership website. Look at how long that exact Toyota Tacoma, TRD Off-Road or TRD Sport, has been sitting on that dealership lot, and then use that to your leverage. Again, that's another opportunity, another weapon in your arsenal for you to get closer to that invoice pricing or even sub-invoice pricing. Say, hey, I want that TRD off-road. I see you've had it for 137 days according to your website. Are you willing to get close to that invoice for me if it means making a deal today? And more often than not, they're going to work with you. They want to move this metal. But what if that dealership doesn't want to move? What if they don't want to get off of their lousy discount that they're offering? Maybe they're only offering $2,000 off that Tacoma. What if that's the case? Well, easy. Pick up the phone and call another dealership up the road. There's so many dealerships that are offering huge discounts, so many dealerships that are actually willing to play ball. It's not worth your time and effort to try to squeeze every nickel out of your stingy local dealership. It's not worth it. It's like when that girl, Candace, broke up with you in 3rd grade. What did your mom say? There's plenty of other fish in the sea. It's true. Candace. You have examples like the F-150 Lightning here that were perhaps the most laughable example because Ford realized that they had overproduced this vehicle and demand was not there for it. Even while offering huge government subsidies combined with Ford discounts, dealer discounts, bringing them to anywhere from $22,000 to $29,000 off. $22,000 to $29,000 off the Ford F-150 Lightning here. And even then, they weren't selling. They could not move these things. So a lot of dealerships were actually turning away their allocations for these. They did not want to receive these because they knew that they were going to just be an added burden for the dealership. It does the dealership no good to take on this inventory if they can't move this metal. Check it out though. Hopefully you can see it there. Well, maybe not, but $79,965 for this F-150 Lightning. That's a huge part of the problem. Wildly overpriced for what you get. Not to mention, the people buying F-150 Lightning, blue-collar working class, they're not interested in an electric truck, let's face it. We have examples like the Ford Bronco here, especially the big body Broncos, the Badlands, Wildtrak, Sasquatch package, the Ford Bronco Raptor. These were coming with huge premiums, often markups during the last several years, but now look at them. They're stacked up on dealership lots and they have $8,000 to $10,000 off discounts advertised regularly, and even then they can't move this metal. So fascinating that we went from, they couldn't sell them for anything less than a $5,000 markup to 10 grand off and they still can't move the metal. Kind of wild, huh? Quite astonishing to see the profit margin that's being built into these vehicles today, right? I mean, take the F-150 for example. Many of these trimmed examples here, the Lariat, the King Ranch, the Limited, these all have a tremendous profit margin built in, kind of a sickening amount, right? We're talking probably $15,000 to $20,000 profit margin, and that is why there is such a huge gap between invoice, how much a dealership pays for the F-150, compared to that MSRP. They know that these will likely sell means America's #1 selling pickup truck for 48 consecutive years, and they have that little reputation with it, of course. And they're great trucks. I bought one myself, right? But they have a tremendous amount of profit. The confusing bit for so many people is, why is it that I can only get maybe $5,000 to $7,000 off my F-150 XL here, but I can get up to $15,000, $17,000 off a Platinum or a Limited or a King Ranch? Why is that? Well, when they stuff these vehicles to the gills with technology and creature comforts and inflate that MSRP tremendously, that hikes up the profit margin. That gap between invoice and MSRP is much bigger on a Platinum compared to the XL here. So that is why you generally cannot get that same sort of discount on a $55,000 truck compared to an $85,000 truck, if that makes sense. That's why a lot of people are confused, because they want to go buy a Honda Civic and it's $31,000, $32,000, but they're only giving them $2,000 off. What gives? Well, truthfully, that invoice pricing on that Civic is much closer to that $31,000 price point, right? It probably is right around $25,000. So you probably could get maybe $4,000 to $5,000, $6,000 off of it if you tried, and if you bent the fingers back of the sales rep, you could probably work closer to that. But getting it willy-nilly like Ford is offering on their F-150s, it's not the same. It's not the same battle that you fight. Getting that invoice pricing is perhaps the most critical piece. Let me remind you of how much they want for this full-size Ford Expedition here. This one's a Platinum. Look at that, over $80,000. 80 grand, that has become our reality. If you're like me and you have a big family at home, it's almost become unattainable to come out and buy a full-size SUV like this. This one's not even the Max. Let me show you a Max right next to it. This is, so you get a little bit of a longer back end, more space beyond that third row. So if you got kiddos that play hockey like mine, you're likely going to need the Max. Let's go look at the price tag on this one here. This one's a lesser trim though. So this one's a Platinum on this side. This one over here is an Active. So it should, well, so I was going to say theoretically maybe be a little bit less. $87,000. Absolutely insane. That is our new reality. And that is why so many people are just deciding to keep a hold of their current vehicle longer. They're keeping a hold of it, keeping it on the road, performing that necessary maintenance and service rather than coming out and trying to buy a new vehicle every 3 to 5 years. It's become infeasible to do that, right? It's pretty sad. With the exception of just a few examples nowadays, supply has far exceeded demand. And we saw that issue arise with these Super Duties here. F250s, F350s, F450s, especially the high-spec, high-trim, desirable examples here, they were hard to come by throughout the last few years. And because of that, you were hard-pressed to get a discount of anything below MSRP. A lot of dealerships were unfortunately still trying to get markups on these throughout the last few years, licking their chops, being greedy about it. But nowadays, supply has far exceeded demand. Unless it's like a Raptor R, you can expect to go in there and negotiate well below MSRP. So it's very important for you to understand what that starting price point is, and that is invoice. And pretend you really do want to work with your local dealership and they're being a little bit stingy with offering you what that invoice price tag is. What I would then suggest is offer 20% below MSRP as a starting point. Some of you may argue, hey, maybe 30%, but if you're realistically trying to land a deal on the vehicle, 20% below that price tag on most vehicles makes sense as a starting point. Even like on the Maverick here, it actually might be a stretch to ask 20% below this because invoice is probably a little bit closer to that. Let me remind you of how much they want for these here. This here is a 2024 XLT trim. 2024, $33,000. So your chances of actually getting 20% off of this is much higher given the fact that it's already been on the lot technically for over a year. It's already celebrated a birthday on this dealership lot. So just under 33 grand, I don't think you'd be totally far-fetched asking for $26,000, $27,000 if it meant making a deal on this thing. Remind them, hey, it's been here for over a year. Let me take this off your hands, and maybe they will. Pretend we took that same philosophy and applied it to this Ranger over here, this Lariat trimmed Ranger that's priced just under $50,000. What is that? $40,000 is what you'd be asking. That's not totally far-fetched. I bet invoice on this probably is right around $41,000, $42,000 if we're being honest with each other. So you tell me, 20% off, that's a realistic starting point. You can, of course, go further than that, asking, hey, I want to get $35,000 for this. Ask for 30% off. But that just becomes a little bit more unrealistic. A good rule of thumb is the less bells and whistles on the vehicle, the more sparse down, bare bones it is, the less likely you are going to get a substantial discount on it because there isn't that profit margin built in with all those additional creature comforts, right? Same goes for like this Ranger STX example, priced at $38,000. It's already $12,000 cheaper than the Lariat right next to it. So you can't expect to get that same discount because it's just not built in. A big factor to consider is, of course, inventory numbers and inventory levels of it. You can leverage nice resources like CarEdge where they actually track and monitor the average days on lots of so many vehicles. Vehicles like the Ford Bronco Sport here, although they sell, they're not wildly popular, right? And there's always an abundance of inventory of these things. But you can find out what the average days on lots are for a vehicle. Like Rams in particular, they're upwards of 500 days on lot, average lot time across the country, across the lineup, 1,500, 2,500, 3,500. Find out what it is for the Ford Bronco Sport. If this is what you're interested in, say, hey, on average, you see that these are sitting on dealership lots for 140 days on average, whatever it is, right? And use that to your benefit. Use it as a weapon when you start negotiating the price tag on these, right? So if you were, only do you want to use that nationwide data, use their local data. Say, hey, I see that you have 18 of these sitting on the dealership lot. 12 of them you've had for over 4 months here. Can you work a deal with me if it meant selling one today? And I bet they will. Just for context sake, behind me is my own personal Ford F-150 Raptor 37 performance package. Being able to get this at MSRP throughout the last few years was a little bit of a chore. And more often than not, so many dealerships were still trying to get $3,000 to $5,000 over MSRP for them. A lot of greedy dealerships out there. But right now, you can get them pretty easily at invoice pricing. If you just fire up the interwebs and actually do some homework and do some clicking around and calling around, even F-150 Raptors, you can get it invoice pricing. So I plugged that just to remind you, even on the quote-unquote desirable trims here, hard to find, hard to get trims, you can get invoice pricing. So you should absolutely expect it on your F-150 XLT trim, your Lariat trim, or your Honda Civic. You should absolutely expect it. Those of you interested in numbers, MSRP on this was just over $95,000. Invoice pricing on the Raptor 37 Performance Package in particular is $88,300 for this particular one. So for many of those examples over there, there's a much higher profit margin built into those F-150s over there, like the XLT, like the Platinum. There's a $12,000 to $15,000, $17,000 premium built into them. And I know a lot of you probably hate to hear it, but the profit margin between invoice and MSRP on this Toyota Camry is probably a lot closer, a lot smaller than what you would hope for. MSRP, as you can see, is just over $36,000 for this Toyota Camry XLE. I would confidently tell you that the invoice pricing on this is no more than $31,000. So your likelihood of getting a discount larger than $5,000 off on this Toyota Camry is pretty slim. We witnessed Toyota inflate their price tags on so many of their popular models. The Toyota Tacoma, the Tundra, the Land Cruiser, the Sequoia, and the 4Runner here now with the all-new 6th generation. This one's sporting the iForce Max turbo hybridized 4-banger underneath the hood. MSRP, hopefully you can see it. Maybe you won't, but MSRP is $54,378 on this TRD off-road trim, okay? So there's your MSRP. We've seen already so many dealerships offer tremendous discounts right out of the gate for these new generation Toyotas. We're talking up to $12,000, $13,000 off for the Tundras, $7,000 to $10,000 off being now a regular occurrence on a lot of the trim examples of the Tacoma. And now we're starting to see even $4,000 to $7,000 off for many of these 4Runner trims. Not a lot of people are wildly excited about the 4-banger underneath the hood on these, and the hybrid 4-banger, people are saying no thank you. So invoice pricing on this, I would say, is maybe mid-40s. Talk about it too much on the channel, I know, but a quick plug. Toyota outsourced production of the Toyota Tacoma here entirely to Mexico, where they pay Mexican employees 80% less, over 80% less compared to what they paid American employees down in Texas previously. And yet they still hiked up the price tag 20 to 23% across the lineup on all various trims. So kept the price tags very high, all while they're saving tremendously in building this thing. Make it make sense. And the Chevy Colorado ZR2 is a really good example of having such a small profit margin on it, especially the ZR2 Bison. This one's not the Bison package. The Bison has like the AEV bumpers, AEV wheels, a little more dolled up. And I can tell you with full confidence that that truck there has maybe a $4,000 tops gap between invoice pricing and their MSRP. The Bison is priced right around $60,000, $61,000 on a good day with some additional running boards or whatever, right? But look at this one, ZR2 here, not the Bison, priced at just under $59,000. This one here, I bet the invoice is maybe a $5,000 gap on it. Don't forget, the biggest weapon that you have in your arsenal when trying to negotiate a vehicle is your ability to walk away. Being able to walk away from a deal can save you thousands of dollars, but so many people are afraid to do it. They feel like if they don't capitalize on that deal that day, they're gonna lose out, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So when you're working a deal and they're not quite getting to where you wanna be on it, and even if they are, I would still encourage you to walk away, because I assure you that that sales rep, that sales manager is gonna be picking up the phone and blowing up your phone to try to get you back into the dealership for what you wanted to pay for it originally, or perhaps an even better deal. So don't be afraid to walk away. To wrap up this video, I'm going to leave you with perhaps the most important piece of advice that I can give you guys when buying a vehicle, and I mean that. Pick up the phone, find a dealership that has the same exact vehicle that you're interested in locally, find it maybe 2 or 3 states away, call them up and say, hey, what is the best deal that you can offer me if I meant buying a plane ticket and flying out and buying your vehicle? Find out what that is. Get that in writing. Ask them to text it to you. Ask them to email it to you. And generally they will say, hey, I want to just kind of confirm the breakout of the numbers, make sure nothing's being snuck in on me, no additional fees. Can you email it to me or text it to me? And they will. They will do that as long as you're polite and kind when you're asking, of course, right? So get them to send it to you. And then, well, pick up the phone again and call another dealership. Again, maybe 2 states away at this point. Each time you're picking up the phone, calling a dealership, getting closer and closer to where you live. And that way, when you are asking that next dealership to beat that offer of the previous dealership, they generally will by $500 or $1,000. And you pick up the phone again and say, hey, I got this deal from another dealership. Are you willing to beat it? Always ask them, are you willing to beat it? Don't ask them to match it. Ask them, are you willing to beat it? And generally, like I said, they'll come down just a little bit less than it. And by the time that you've called maybe 4, 5, 6 dealerships, you're ready to call your local dealership or walk into your local dealership and say, hey, here's the best deal that I found on that truck that you have out front. Are you willing to beat it for me if it meant making a deal today? I'm local to you. I'd love to keep my business in my backyard. Are you willing to work with me? And in my experience, they will if it means making a sale. All right, guys, I'll wrap up the video there. So find out what invoice pricing is. Use that as your starting point on the vehicle. Do some homework on the vehicle too, right? Find out what that nationwide average days on lot for that vehicle is. and look at the local dealership and the dealerships around you. Find out how many of that vehicle is sitting in inventory. Use that all to your advantage when you're negotiating the deal. And if you're uncomfortable asking for invoice, a good rule of thumb is if you actually want to make a deal happen, start at 20% off of that MSRP. And I think that's a good rule of thumb for most vehicles. As always, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to tune into these videos. If you appreciate this type of content whatsoever and would like to see more, I do respectfully request that you please consider like and subscribe. Your support means a ton, and I promise you it doesn't go unnoticed. Until next time.